what makes a small state a successful financial center. And Baldur has agreed to give us a few comments on the opposite question, what makes a small state to become an unsuccessful financial center in a way. So he would like to give us his perspective on Iceland and the attempts there actually to be a financial center as well. Thank you.
Thank you. I will try to do my best in few words. First, Iceland, a relatively successful economy, same as the other Nordic states, high economic growth per capita, main fish, main export, aluminium, and tourism, the third big industry. Icelanders tend to be experts when it comes to fishing and geothermal energy, providing green electricity for our big aluminium industry. Then in 2003, our government privatized our 3 state-run banks, which accounted for over 90% of Iceland's of financial institutions in Iceland. And following the privatization program, there was an economic boom in the country. We have our own currency, krona. Iceland is part of the European Economic Area, basically part of the common market, except for agriculture and fisheries. So we adopt the EU law on the financial sector, which all helped out. We took part in a free movement of capital within the EEA, European Economic Area. But after only 5 years after privatization, our financial institutions all collapsed overnight, and so did our economy. As soon as the financial crisis hit the world, Iceland was the first one to be hit, and overnight, basically everything collapsed. For 3 months, the Icelandic Central Bank provided money for the import of food, medicine, and petrol. Can you imagine the situation in a Nordic state? It was a bit scary. So basically, what happened? During the economic boom, as I mentioned earlier, the central bank kept interest rates high, and the financial sectors, this new privatized financial sector, really emphasized high interest and was trying to drag as much money into the country as possible, and was quite successful. In the spring of 2008, these 3 financial institutions counted for 11 times Iceland's gross domestic product. 11 times. So why did they fail? To give you the short answers, 4 points. First, the small economy was simply too small to give the financial institutions any backup. The state's budget and the central bank could not help the institutions out when they faced external pressure. They couldn't bail them out. There was no way. Now, today, Icelandic politicians hail themselves and say, we were not so stupid as the other Europeans to bail our banks out. That was not the question. They could not do it. They really wanted to do so, but they couldn't do it. Second, there was no external backup either. Iceland is not a member of the European Union. Iceland tried to seek assistance in Brussels, but came to closed doors. Icelandic government went to Washington and asked for the US to help out. The US did always help Iceland out during economic crisis during the Cold War, when Iceland was in a strategic, geographically important location. The Americans refused to help out, but at some point the Russian government, some of you may remember this, the Russian government offered to bail Iceland out, or at least there came this unofficial offer from Russia. So the Icelandic government thought, yeah, now we get Americans to move back in. So they immediately sent the Minister of Foreign Affairs to the US Embassy in Reykjavik, who told them, see what's happening now, the Russians are moving in, now you have to come and rescue us. There came an answer from Washington 2 hours later, are relieved that someone else was bailing Iceland out. But the offer from, somehow this offer from Russia disappeared in the post. We don't really know what happened to it. So yeah, and two more things. So no, the country was simply, the economy was simply too small, no external backup. Both these points are extremely important if you want to become a financial sector. And two more points. Third, it was the basically ideology. Big is beautiful, not small is beautiful. So it's all about extending the financial sector. The Icelandic government encouraged the expansion of the financial sector. It never set any limits. And fourth and finally, we are talking about lack of resources, lack of expertise, limited administrative capacity. The country had no experts when it came to running a financial center or financial institutions. The expertise are simply in other fields. So all this basically contributed to the failure of this experiment, brought the country to its knees for a few months, but luckily, due to a strong infrastructure and the fact that the IMF moved in 12 months later, the country is flourishing again, and we all had economic growth already in 2011. This was the short answer.
Thank you very much. Thank you for agreeing spontaneously to give your views on Iceland. That was very, very helpful. I would like to open up to the floor for questions. Maybe we can reflect a little bit more on the advantages of small states as financial centers. If anyone has comments on the tax law issue, I welcome you as well to comment on it. Unfortunately, we didn't have any presentation, but if someone feels that they would like to say something on the topic, please do. Yes.
Thanks for the presentation. Thanks very much. Thanks very much for the presentation. Like one of you said, tax law isn't really my area of forte, but I wanted to ask you a question, Professor, about Liechtenstein/Luxembourg's experience in moving themselves away from this perception of being a shadowy state dealing with illegal transactions and sort of laboring under the label of, you know, an illegal tax jurisdiction, and coming into the light and being accepted now. I think you described it as a place where there's just smart ways of managing trusts, etc. Because the reason I ask is because Caribbean states, even if everybody accepts, have implemented FATF obligations, OECD obligations, still labor under this label of being these backwater jurisdictions and Panama, etc., even if they are cooperating with tax authorities. So I don't know if it's a problem of something we're not doing that we should be doing, something in the PR department that we shouldn't be doing, that would make us more accepted as legitimate jurisdictions for doing business in a smart way like Liechtenstein has managed to do. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That's an excellent question. Actually, I guess the experience of Liechtenstein in particular is a bit different for two reasons. First of all, being landlocked in the heart of Europe helps. Because you can constantly be in touch with the ones that would eventually continue on putting you under pressure. Second, what also helps is not being just a financial center, but having also a real and a strong economy. Liechtenstein is the most industrialized state in Europe, or maybe even in the world, I'm not sure. But looking at the fact that there is a lot of actually, production sites of for instance, Hilti, the drilling machines, or Ivoclar, the dental technique corporation, or it's even a market leader, world market leader, I think, for dental technique. There's quite a lot of issues, whether the financial industry, is 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 90, 99% of the economy, and I guess this was also an issue regarding Iceland, saying, well, what else is there, from the point of view of the economy. Now, the second part of your question related to marketing. Well, this is a bit of a mentality thing. There is some, jurisdictions that are great at marketing themselves, and others that put less effort in that. I'm sure that Luxembourg, because you also mentioned Luxembourg, did a terrific job in the last, 15, 20 years in marketing itself as a financial center by sending around, representatives from the surveillance authority, but also from, many other market players around the world. And, at the end of the day, as mentioned in my presentation, it's all about seeing the law and the opportunities that the law offers in a financial center as a product that can be exported, or, the service industry. There is actually no recipe, so to speak, on how to improve the reputation. One recipe for sure is the one to engage into as many double tax agreement or exchange of information agreements as possible, to recognize that times have changed, that you cannot win an international battle between large and big and small states by offering just a service to hide money from tax authorities, that these times are over. And I think, that the icing on the cake are like the Panama papers, or, or further papers that will come up in the next weeks or months or years, because I'm sure there will be, other newspapers and media interested in buying information by, people that hack firewalls or whatever. So I think it's about knowledge and offering good services and having as much legal certainty and safety as possible. And this, I guess, brings us to all various topics of this conference, also about enforcement and dispute settlement.
We had 3 more questions. First, George Barker, then Robert Volterra, and then Barbara Doman. And I think then we have to close the question and comment session as well.
I just wanted to pick up the question asked about how do small states deal with the developing narrative that they're all money laundering, tax haven, sort of backwater cheats and thieves. Well, I think you have to counteract that narrative with the alternative narrative that competition between states, and a lot of small states, might actually offer a better world, where people can pay tax according to the benefit principle, which was developed by Lindahl, a Swedish economist in the late 19th century, as the principle upon which the whole tax system should be based, which is you pay taxes according to the benefit that you get from a society. In which case, it's arguable that rather than being the problem being tax havens, there is the risk of tax prisons and tax cartels, where states don't want to have to compete with each other to collect tax from people for services they're delivering. Rather, they get together and they just put taxes up. And then they don't deliver as many services, or they don't deliver them as many efficiently. They rather redistribute that tax revenue to elites or people who keep them in power. In that sense, the tax haven is the great gift to the whole society, the global society, because it gives us a safety valve where you can exit cartels and prisons and find a safer haven to grow your wealth and your well-being and pay a reasonable price in tax. So there's a reasonable story in here. That's not to say I don't think criminals and drug addicts and whatever and people who traffic children shouldn't be chased vigorously by police forces and whatever, but that's a different problem. Certainly follow their money, that's true, but the idea of a state standing in the global marketplace offering a lower tax rate than other people, to me, is not a bad thing. That's a good thing. The question is whether the property that is then located in that state is being paid a reasonable market price when it's sold elsewhere in the world. If it is receiving a reasonable market price for the property located in the tax haven, then profits should lie where they fall. They should lie in the tax haven. So there is a very sophisticated and good narrative in here. This is no one arguing for it because it sounds like you're a money launderer.
Robert Volterra? If you would just pass the microphone to the front. Thank you.
You'd asked me to share a thought or two from my practice. I'm not a tax expert either, but spend my life representing governments. And I have represented governments in the Caribbean and the Americas, the Middle East and Asia that have been grappling with this issue of tax and so on. Certainly, behind closed doors, I would say that the view just expressed about collusive cartels of particularly European states seeking to impose oligopolistic visions of legitimate taxation have, in my hearing, been expressed quite freely, and one can see some validity in it. If companies in an industry behaved like France and the European Commission seek to behave about tax, the leaders would all be in jail and their finances would be impounded quite quickly. But the interesting thing that I'll focus on very, very quickly is in relation to the clients with which I've worked, which are all small states. They were targeted along with many other states by the OECD and Western countries and put literally on lists, saying this country is a tax haven, tax cheat, helping money launderers, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And they perceived that as an outrageous attack of a very aggressive nature against them. The responses all were the same, actually, which was very interesting given some of the topics being discussed today. The response of each of them was to make great efforts to isolate themselves from their co-listees, so much for regional solidarity and so on, and to seek to identify themselves as being unique and not fitting the accusations by showing that they already had the sorts of things that Professor Schurr and others have been talking about, proper regulation and double tax treaties and so on. So instead of fighting back and saying, you are the problem, not us, or we're just engaging in market capitalism that is no more or less legitimate than your high taxes. Instead of fighting back, they tried to say, no, it's them, not us, which is a very interesting reaction, perhaps reflecting the power imbalance in the dialogue. Tied into that was a very interesting experience. I was engaged by Dubai to create the Dubai International Financial Center from the public international architecture and from the domestic UAE constitutional architecture. I'm sure those of you who know the UAE know that it's essentially a regional organization of a very loose kind, with essentially seven autonomous entities, and their constitution is, in many ways, it says constitution, but it's really more a public international law, interstate relationship mechanism for an international organization. So that was a fascinating task. But one of the things they did to address the issue of how can they become a legitimate financial center immediately was to, I'm sure I didn't invent anything new, but I said, well, what you need to do is you need to contract directly with the United Kingdom and the United States of America to get parallel legitimacy for SEC and what was then the FCA, I think, regulatory regime. So essentially getting the SEC and the FCA to agree that if you allow them to regulate the activities of their licensed entities within your territory, that the quid pro quo was they would give that licensing and recognition. And a country like Dubai, UAE, this is an example, they don't have the personnel. If they sent people away to get trained, it would take years. They don't have the personnel to do that themselves. So in order to get the legitimacy of being an international financial center with proper regulation and transparency and so on, they entered in negotiations basically to import the regime and the supervision, which was an interesting thing. The last point on dodgy tax scams, but once every 12 to 18 months, someone comes and knocks on my door with exactly the same scheme, which is some scion of a now disempowered European noble family, often royal, has discovered that the government of fill-in-the-blank small country will give a 1,000-year lease on an island and allow this person to set up their own country and issue passports and so on, and they want to be a tax scam tax haven. Someone tried to do it with those offshore platforms in the Channel in the 1960s, but very interestingly, it's the same scheme each time, and that's clearly a tax scam that they're trying to do. They're trying to make money by through a tax scam. So as one does as a practicing lawyer in those circumstances, to get rid of a client, just quote them at an astronomically high fee. And they all come back. They all come back and they say, well, look, we'd like to give you a piece of the action, like a contingency sort of thing. So once it works out and everything, you'll get all this money. And they all say, and we'll give you a noble title. So if ever you're introduced to me or you look on our website and you see that I am His Serene Highness Robert Gustavo Volterra of the islands of East Ruritania, then you'll know I've succumbed and there's a tax dodge.
Thank you. A last question or remark from Barbara Dolman.
It's not a question, it's a remark. There was a question asked about marketing, and there was some answer given as to what you might do. There's also an answer to be given as to what you don't do. And when I went to one of the large Caribbean jurisdictions and opened the drawer in my bedside table, I found 1, the Bible, and 2, a pamphlet which said, do you want to hide your assets from the revenue, from your wife and from your creditors? Come to us.
Thank you. Before I give the floor to Professor Robert Volterra for his concluding speech of what was a very, very interesting and very rich conference day, please join me in thanking our panelists for their excellent contributions. Thank you.